All right, we'll get started here. Thank you everyone who's joining us for this month's Ask the Operator webinar. I'm Michaela Pochner, the managing editor at No-Till Farmer. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We are also sharing this recording with Ag Equipment Intelligence, which is another magazine that my company publishes, and that one's for farm equipment manufacturers and farm equipment dealers, and they are very interested in what our three panelists today have to say about how the season went and what they're looking ahead to in 2024. And they're also interested in hearing from you in the audience too. So if you have any comments you'd like to share, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or type them in the chat and we'll address those. And then as always, we'll take your questions as well. So feel free to leave those in the chat too. So with that, I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves. We'll start with Loran.
Good morning again, everybody, and welcome back. This is kind of the last one for this year. So according to Michaela, we actually have a plan this year or for today's event. So I'm looking forward to actually seeing this have a little flow and rhythm compared to we just shoot from the hip most of the time. But most of you know me pretty well by now. But this year, we dealt with a lot of curveballs and that. Mother Nature decided we still need to learn a few things, and I think you guys all heard what we did throughout the year, so I'll defer to Lincoln and Tom to introduce themselves a little bit. And Lincoln showed up here yesterday, and we put him to work right away. So
yeah, my name's Lincoln Fishman. I'm a vegetable farmer from Massachusetts, and I had the opportunity to come out to Iowa this week. Knocked on Loran's door yesterday. I wanted to see the inner seeder. I do some stuff with planting vegetables directly into clover. And I know that Loran has experience with that. So I just was hoping to look at some equipment, and I got roped into a whole bunch of things. So I'll see how relevant my experience is to this conversation. I hope I can chime in a little bit here.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So in Central California, just a lot of people know where Tulare is at. Tulare County is the #1 dairy county in the country. Been a dairy farmer most of my life. Grew up on a family dairy, and went to farming. So I have T-Bar Dairy and White Gold Dairy. We milk a combined 2,000 cows on the two facilities. Diversified farming, row cropping, of course, feed for the cows. We have little pistachios, a little lemons, a little mandarins, just to keep things interesting. Plus, we run long reach excavators, cleaning dairy ponds and flooded river channels like we did a lot this year. Really a different year this year from a drought to a flood. Trucking company, hauling commodities and equipment. So we're real diversified just to keep us from being bored out here.
Wow.
No dry dirt sitting under the feet.
There is now, but I'll tell you what, for a long period of time there, we had the second wettest year on record. I'm also the president of our local irrigation district board, and we've got records back since the inception of the district in 1950, and this was the second wettest year. And we had 3 excavators, a backhoe, working around the clock in March during the flooding, just trying to keep the river channels, some of the distribution gates and things open because we had so much trash coming down the river, overflowing banks. Really an interesting time. So yeah,
this was
dried up.
This was clogged with trash or with runoff, with silt or what?
Everything. We had. Now remember, this is California. We're not allowed, because of environmental rules, to do a lot of river channel maintenance because there might be a blunt-nosed lizard or frog or something. So there was a lot of through the drought times when we should have normally in history we would have been cleaning channels. Well, so we ended up with the drought for basically 3.5 years. There was a lot of trees that died. So we were actually pulling, and I've got video. It's interesting to see if anybody wants to at some point in the future email me. Kayla knows how to get in touch with me, but I can put up little clips of us pulling out 30-foot trees that were sitting there in the gates of our diversion gates that we had to just keep from plugging the whole system up and then just wiping out the entire riverbanks. And there was places that actually did happen.
So irrigation wise, are you flood irrigating then, or pivots, or ditch irrigation? What are you?
So our system is the Friant system, runs down the east side of the valley. So it's a lined canal that delivers water to 23 different contractors, irrigation districts. And our particular district is an open channel. So we've got open canals from when we receive the water east of me. So 50% of our water that deliveries that come through our channels end up in groundwater recharge. And, 50% is actually diverted to crops. If you have permanent plantings like, around here, a lot of pistachios, walnuts, a lot of the trees and vines, they'll have drip systems or fan systems. So they'll be running that water through filters and so on. Our field crops are all flood irrigated, basically, just because in the dairy scenario, we've got lagoon water that we've got to blend and run to the field. So yeah, we're flood irrigating and recharging the underground like that, which we've done always, but now all of a sudden it's become a really big deal in our Sigma world, called the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, signed by the governor 7 years ago, 8 years ago. That's create a lot of havoc, but it makes the environmental people feel real happy.
But it sounds like it's a constant ongoing battle, that maintenance wise, not with the environmental and that, then, correct?
It's as long as we're allowed to do maintenance. So like in the river channel, see, our canals are private properties per se. So, we keep those clean. They're 30 foot wide at the top and they taper down. They're 10 foot deep, and that's water delivery all around. But the water actually comes through the Tule River, which is a separate system from our Friant irrigation system. And so the Tule River is a natural channel, and that's the one that you can't control. You get a permit from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. They'll let you clean a mile at a time, and here you got 100 miles of river that you need to maintain. And when they let you do a mile for a period of time, and then they let you do another mile another time for another permit, it's just challenging and burdening, and you can't. Unfortunately, you hear about homeless people. We actually have homeless people that will live in the channel as well, and they were displaced during the flooding, and there's so much of their trash and garbage and things that got thrown in the river, left in the river, ended up in these diversion points that were cleaned out as well. It's been quite an experience.
With the flood irrigation, then how does that affect your compaction and stuff like that? I guess. I mean, to me, flooding would change the logistics drastically, I guess.
Well, surprisingly, in the conservation tillage, so we've been doing the conservation tillage. We started the no-till in 2020. I'm sorry, 2000. We've been doing it for 23 years. And with our crop rotations, we re-level fields. Like if we're going to be planting alfalfa, that's a 5-year crop, 5 or 6 year crop. So we will, re-level the field, laser level, put our levees up, and we'll rip in between 24, 36 inches. And that's pretty much the only chiseling that we do anymore. Once our alfalfa is ready to come out, we'll no-till wheat into it, and using our no-till drill. And after that, then we'll chop the wheat off, and then we'll strip till corn in to make corn silage. So we double crop. a winter wheat crop, and then come back with our strip-till corn silage. And the compaction, because we have, we're making some pretty impressive crops. We'll chop off 20 to 25 tons, sometimes more, wheat crop for silage, and then come back and pull off between 30 and 38 tons of corn silage. Running our
is what you're saying.
Yeah, and our soils we're level. Our water quality is actually pretty good. So we don't have a lot of salts in the water. In my area, there are other areas that'll compete with that a little bit. They'll have some challenges. But with our crop rotations and like when the corn comes off, we'll come in and we'll spread our dry manure, from the dairies, and that'll basically just kind of keep itself worked in. And so we've got some really good soil, pretty much sandy loam for the most part, and it just doesn't really tighten up as long as we've got our rotations going and minimum compaction from the conservation tillage.
Essentially, you would probably, in the valley there, you'd probably never have a fallow period then, would you? I mean, you don't freeze per se to any degree, do you? Or
No, our temperatures get down into the low 30s. As a matter of fact, I just got a text from our wind machine starting up in our citrus. When it gets down to 30, 31 degrees, they come on automatically. We monitor them remotely. But our lowest temperatures normally will be in the mid 20s, possibly low 20s. If it gets much below that, if it gets in the teens, we are not ready. Our water lines are 12 to 18 inches deep. We have a lot of surface lines, on the dairy. Our water lines are basically exposed. It's not like we don't have those sub-zero temperatures where it's a problem. So winter chill.
So that means you've got the opportunity to have something green and growing 12 months out of the year.
Pretty much, yes. Yeah, as a matter of fact, our winter wheat is being planted now. There's fields that are up 2 to 3 inches. There's some that's just being planted, and that'll get planted all the way up to the first of. Everybody wants it done before Christmas holidays, absolutely, but there's guys that take advantage of the kids being home from school, and it'll put a lot of tractors in the field and get her done. So.
Right.
If that was going for grain, then when would that get harvested? I mean, what harvesting for silage, you're going to go earlier, but
Right. So when we go for silage, it gets chopped off in April, May. If it's going to make grain, we'll just let it go, and grain will start first week of June, basically.
okay.
So yeah, it's and even then, we used to always go ahead and do grain, and then we would double crop the corn behind it, with a 90-day or 105-day variety.
Your alfalfa, then you're getting 5 years out of a cutting, you said, right? Or seeding. How many cuttings a year would that be?
So if you do a good job with your alfalfa weed control, there's of course the Roundup varieties that is utilized in certain places, but if we're going to get 5 years out of it, do some good maintenance, we will get our first chopping. So we'll chop the first cutting. If everything normal times, we'll be taking that off in about second week of April, chop it off, and then 30 days later, we just start rolling. We'll end up potentially with 8 cuttings a year. We'll chop the first. We'll get five really solid cuttings of baled hay, 1.25 to 1.75 throughout the year, each cutting, 5 or 6 of those, and then we'll get sometimes do green chops at the end. We just chopped off last week. We're probably done for the winter now, but it only takes 10, 12 days of good weather, and all of a sudden, if you've got good growth, you may just go clip it again. We really don't have any downtime. That's kind of the whole thing. Winter time, you spend a little time in the shop. We don't have the, I've got a nice shop to work in, but you guys have got shops where you store everything in and work on it in the winter for 6 months or so, or 4 months. We just don't have that kind of downtime. So we
Wax shops, we call them.
yeah, yeah.
That's where you pull it in and wash and wax.
Yeah.
But I'm a little intrigued with the 10 cuttings a year. Are you noticing any compaction issues on the alfalfa and stuff like that? Or are you able to cut off the irrigation and that soil's dry enough you don't worry too much about the compaction?
Oh, the soil dries right away. Sometimes we'll put 2 irrigations on in the summer. We'll chop off or get baled off. The day that we cut, we're usually baled and off the ground in 5 days, 6 days, and then you got water running right back on. And the water softens the ground up. It just keeps it loose for the roots to continue to expand. So we're also running. We're doing 3x4 bales now. Years ago, my uncle killed the 4x4 bale market out here when he bought a baler and had 8 hay fires because he was used to the 12x24s and going big bale. The moistures were a little high, had some issues, but so we were small bale for years. Eventually, and through the prototype working with Heston, we got back to a 3x4 bale. We're running 16-foot headers on our windrowers and, light equipment to rake. We use wheel rakes, not tedders. And, big flotation tires on our bale wagons to pick them up. So the compaction, the ground is dry. The only time we may have an issue is if you try to sneak off a fall cutting and maybe it had some rain and, you run the trucks and the choppers in there. Well, the trucks are 28-foot trailers, pulled by semis, and we'll only half load them or 3/4 load them, not try to create a compaction issue because the trucks are the ones that'll do the compacting, not so much the farm equipment.
And I know that, talking with Rick Clark last night, that was part of the conversation we've always had when we're at his place, that, he's got the dairy there and all the compaction from the number one, the silage crew, but then you got the manure crew on the backside. And
yeah. And soil conditioning, like I said, we've got really, really good soil to start with that doesn't pack up real tight anyway. So as long as we, watch our time to get on there, you give it an extra day or two, and it'll go from, being fairly damp to firm enough on the top, 7, 8 inches, to maintain the stability.
And with that dry manure, I mean, what kind of organic matter are you seeing there? I mean, because that'll have a huge impact too on the resiliency of the soil.
Well, on the organic matter, gosh, I wish I had some numbers to give you because I really don't. I've kind of gotten away from that. I leave that up to my son-in-law. But we have really good organic matter per se. With the addition of manure, it always keeps that top little bit with a really nice tilth. If you need to go in and say if you decide mid-year that you're going to take some alfalfa out and go to an early corn, we'll irrigate the alfalfa. It'll be 8 inches tall. And we'll go in there as soon as it's firm enough. We'll strip till and plant the corn right into the alfalfa and then spray the alfalfa out. And it'll come up as a real nice tilth. So, we've got good organic matter. It doesn't clot up the soil. So, we're just in heaven. It really.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, Iowa's supposed to be heaven, but I'm sounding like California sounds pretty good.
Yeah,
here.
well, it sounds like heaven, except that he's always got something green and growing in the field, and he's got a dairy.
Other than the neighborhood out there.
Fruit.
Other than the state regulations.
That's the problem.
Yeah, back to that first part of the conversation, the regulations, the environmental regulations and some of that, I think would be a rude awakening for a lot of us. So it's very intriguing. I guess, what is your biggest challenge in the very near future? I guess would see equipment wise and stuff like that to help Michaela get us back on track. Well, I'm just seeing already. We could sit here. Like... We might not get to your questions, Michaela.
Right,
sorry.
right.
You know, I would have to say over the years, the regulation, okay, so we have, you deal with Environmental Protection Agency. You look at all your chemicals and your chemicals have labels on them. Well, we have Cal EPA, and our Department of Pesticide Regulation has to go through all of that too. I've always worked with Extension on test plots and field trials. So this is my 48th year on my own, and I started when I was 2. No, I've always had the good fortune of working with Extension, and I have always said that we're the stepchild of the chemical industry. There's Midwest, you got guys have had so many tools to work with. When I really started getting into no-till, the only reason we were able to do it was because of the Roundup Ready corn, and then came Roundup Ready hay. We were able to do that because we were able to use Roundup. Prior to that, we were iron weeding. We had to do it with cultivators. We had to do it with stuff. And I'm reading about what's going on in the Midwest, because one thing I'll say, my grandfather always had farm magazines on the table. And when we would come in, the dairy barn's right here behind the house, and the shop is right next to the dairy barn. And at 3:00 in the afternoons, we'd come in Avon and Avu's house, grandma and grandpa. I'm Portuguese, so, we carry on the tradition. 3:00, we'd come in and have a Pepsi, and milk and cookies were for breakfast, but Pepsis were for the afternoon. And I'd be looking at the farm magazines, as a teenager. And I just kept seeing all these available things in the Midwest. You could spray with Dual, you could spray, I can't remember the chemicals, but every time I'd say, gosh, that would work here. Well, it doesn't have a California label. So I considered us to be the stepchildren of the chemical industry, but it's because it just wasn't approved. And I could understand the chemical companies, the millions of dollars that they would have to go through to get it approved for California.
One market.
Why spend the money when it wasn't going to have a return on that investment? So we were just left alone if there wasn't an opportunity to have enough sales. And that was put to me point blank by some of the representatives. It says, well, you have this, you have that. How come you don't have it here? It says, well, we're just not going to spend the money to Cal EPA.
Right.
So Roundup really gave us the open door for us to do that. Conservation and strip-till.
Is Roundup still effective for you then? And what is your biggest weed nemesis currently?
Roundup is still one of the most effective tools we have. Of course, we use it in rotations. It's like anything. If you use something too much, things become resistant to it and whatnot. And there was an issue of that for a period of time. We found a few other things, did a couple different rotation styles. We never went back to full conventional, but if you had a problem area, maybe you'd take a field and go conventional for a period of time. That's kind of the other thing that's different here. We have, when you talk about a field, you may be talking about 1,000 or 2,000 acre field. In the Midwest, here we have 160 acre blocks because we basically have a road every mile. And, so then that breaks down. You got your section of a 640 could have 360 acre fields and 840 acre fields. And it just varies. So our implements are all basically 3-point implements, with the exception of our discs, which, are 18 or 20 foot, because you got to get around. Fold up equipment is rare. So we're running 10 row, 30-inch planters, 20 or 25-foot grain drills. But anything bigger than that, there's bridges or there's areas, with canals that have a crossing that you just can't get larger equipment by. So, that kind of changes the way we do things. So when we talk about we're going to take that field conventional, it might be an 80-acre field as opposed to an 800-acre field. So,
And with all those cuttings on the alfalfa, though, I mean, that's a huge part of your weed control right there. If in a 5-year rotation, cut, right? I mean, that's got to be
You're cutting every 30 days for 5 years.
yeah, when we get
Is
to
that what you see, or
yeah, when we get to the fall, our issues might be nutsedge, which you have to address in the spring, because if you haven't got it taken care of by summer, it's there and you're wasting any material after that. So you got to do a spring application for if you have an issue. Flood irrigating, that could be an issue on the lower end of a field, because if for any reason, you miss getting water changed on time, we have return systems that capture our water and pump it back up to the top. And, through pipeline, we're all pipelined, once we receive our water from our irrigation districts or from our deep wells. The alfalfa in the wintertime, like when we get our last cutting, actually next week, we're probably going to be putting down I don't know what blends he's going to be using, but my son-in-law is going to be putting down some herbicide that'll basically dormant the hay and kill anything else that's starting to spring up. Because we are still green. We're still in a growing season, so to speak.
Your tailwater, I guess I'd call it in the south, that generally runs off, but yours doesn't. Once it's on your farm, you have control of it until you utilize it. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's correct. Our tailwater, and we have it constantly. We'll actually have tail sumps, 100 by 100 square sumps, 6-8 foot deep, and we'll have a pump in that. So the tailwater goes into that sump, and then we'll pick that up with a pump and pump it the quarter mile or half mile uphill to the top end of the field back in the pipeline. And in a drought year, when we have very little water, we'll really utilize that as a booster. We'll make sure that those tail sumps get full, and maybe try to get a little extra water at the bottom end of the field that then we can boost the flood water to get it through the field. Otherwise, if you don't have enough water, you may get 2/3 of the way down and it stops because it's already percolating.
Well, are you noticing on your sumps then, compared to a conventional neighbor, you're getting more life out of the sumps and that, or you don't have to clean them as much, I assume, because you're not silting in?
Oh, our sumps are clean year round. I mean, we'll spray any weeds on the edges and things like that. Every once in a while, about every 2 or 3 years, I'll go in with an excavator and just clean what little bit of silt would make its way in there. But again, our soil composition, doesn't yield silt so much going into our tail sumps. So, it's kind of a non-issue in the big picture.
So how does that compare to yours? I mean, that coast to coast here.
Coast to coast. Well, you're talking about little fields in California. I mean, we got really little fields. I'm working with a guy who's got a 500-acre dairy and 250 acres of silage. I think that silage is split over 40 something fields. So 250 acres split over 40 fields. And that's just what our landscape looks like. You know what I mean? It's little pockets here and there. And this guy's in, the River Valley, Connecticut River Valley, which for us is, one of the main, the biggest areas of production that Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont has. You get up into the Champlain Valley, there's some larger pieces there. That's all dairy, pretty much, and silage too. But yeah, I mean, little equipment. I mean, this is just the normal thing. You have to have little stuff. It's got to be 3 point. You got to run in and out constantly. Um, my personal, with vegetables, it doesn't even, we can find little fields and make it work that way because the value's there per acre. But similar thing. I mean, yeah, you're always thinking about how tight of a turn you can make and how you can use that extra tiny bit of square footage. I'm up in the hills up above the Connecticut River Valley, which is pretty terrible for farming. So the only good news there is the land values are really low and it's fairly underutilized. So, we can lease for free. We can lease fields around town, to expand acreage that way.
So yeah, if I understand correctly, so where you're at when you're talking about those little fields, that's because there's so many trees and everything around, isn't it? In other
That's
words,
right. Yeah, Massachusetts is something like, I mean, over 80% tree cover. This is
yeah,
totally different. I mean, in the at 1800, to 1820, I think we were down to like 10% tree cover or something when it was called sheep fever, especially in the area that I'm at. Um, and that was going crazy. And then everybody, the West opened up and it didn't take people long to realize it was going to be a whole lot easier to make a living farming, moving West. So, the industry that we have at this point is really based on high value products that get sold locally. That's really the only way you can make it work. And in particular, high labor crops where there's less of a benefit. Somebody who's at 1,000 acres and somebody who's at 10 acres, if the primary cost is labor in there, then we can still be competitive in the Massachusetts market, right? So you don't see any commodity crop because you just can't make it work. But that dairy, for example, a lot of that stuff gets sold locally. And so it ends up making sense, even though I'm sure his cost of production is way, way higher than yours. He's got that local market there, and that's where the product goes. I struggle to think of anybody who's not getting rid of their stuff within a very small area in the Northeast, right around our farms.
yeah. So it's interesting because I had an intern from Massachusetts that actually came out and worked with me one winter about 6 or 7 years ago, and he was dumbfounded when he got here how we could stand here at the back of the dairy and see the Ventura Coastal orange processing plant 7 miles away because
Right.
there's no trees per se to block it, and you could see over the top of any almond or orchards that may be planted in the area. So yeah, we're flat and we could see for miles and miles.
Yeah. And I said this to Lauren and Rick last night. I mean, one thing that's been impressing me out here in Iowa is if you want to do something different than what your neighbors are doing, everyone knows. And that's a big deal. I think it takes twice as much courage to try something different if you know that everybody's gonna see it and know. And my pieces that I farm, like you can't see them even from the road. I mean, you'd have to know where I was, and you'd have to show up, and I'd have to show you around. And so I can do really stupid things, and if they fail, it's just between me and me. I like to talk about it because I think it's important to talk about failures, but it's a whole lot different than than knowing your whole community is gonna on a daily basis be driving by and seeing what you do. So something I've been thinking a lot about landscape wise and what it means to make a change if you're farming out in the open that way.
See, the neat part about that whole statement is apparently we've been doing things long enough around here different
Yeah.
that nobody pays attention until the neighbor does
it. Right.
Then when the neighbor does it, all of a sudden it's like, did you see what so-and-so is doing? Right. He's like, well, haven't you been watching right across the road for 10 years?
And they're like, yeah, Lauren's crazy. Yeah. Of course he's doing that.
Yeah, right. I always love telling the one story when the first time a neighbor did a relay crop, we had a little disaster right along the road. I let somebody else spray because they were having issues with their sprayer. So they sprayed a pass around my field and they took out 100 feet of corn. And I went in there and I interseeded some corn in there and that, and with the covers in there and that. The one neighbor turned right around in my field because he was so intrigued what the neighbor was doing. I'm at the fair and he's like, "Did you see?" And I was like, "Well, you turned around in my field. Didn't you see it there too?" But I just didn't even pay attention to my field. So.
Right.
Yeah, when you talk about the neighbors looking at you sideways and wondering, if you've gone completely off the rails or not, that was my experience in 2000. Um, we were double cropping from wheat to corn, and I had some equipment went down, and when the window was pretty tight, and anyway, our dealer for some reason had a no-till planter that was just passing through. They were just showing some new equipment, and anyway, I says, you want to demo that, and they said, well, sure. So I started to go do an 80-acre block just to see, because we had just got done irrigating it and getting ready to start doing some tillage work. And so I put the planter in there, the corn planter, and started planting, and we did about 10 acres. And I got on the radio, called a couple of my other guys and told them to stop all the other equipment. And so went from doing that 80-acre block, I did 300 acres, which was what we had left to plant that year. And my neighbors were all calling me nuts and wondered, if the water had gone bad in the area or something. So
what was it that impressed you right up front so immediately? I mean, what was it that you saw? It sounds like it was the minute you got it hooked up and running through the field, you were converted.
The fact that we had done zero tillage in that field, and this planter was planting the corn seed at the right depth in a beautiful tilth in the moisture, and I knew that the seed was safe. In other words, I was just like, wow, this seed is in great position. The ground's soft underneath. We as soon as it came out of the ground, 7 days later, we had corn popping, and 5 days after that, we ran water across it real fast, and it got it going. And I just knew that, hey, this is going to save me this year, because we couldn't get our other equipment repaired and back in to keep up. And what was really very satisfying is the following year, I custom planted 3,200 acres for my neighbors.
Wow.
Because I kept the planter. And,
wow.
I went from being the psycho, you can't do that. Of course, as I stated earlier, it was Roundup Ready seed. And so we were able, we didn't put any equipment back in the field after that planter, with the exception of the spray rig.
Right.
And we knocked it out of the park. We had the same yield as our other fields. And it was actually what I considered about a 5 to 8% improvement on what I believe we would have had there on a normal year, because it was the best yield on that particular field, over the last 4 to 5 years. So it was just fortunate.
And you were saving all these passes, and you were keeping the moisture in the ground.
Correct. Exactly.
Those kinds of conversion rates, like just the idea that 1 year later, right?
Well,
it's incredible.
I'm just sitting here thinking, fast forward to today with the labor situation and that. Think of the impact that would make today, though.
Right.
If you were making the transition
my
today.
all converted. Yeah. We're all strip tilling corn now. There's nobody doing it conventional, except maybe they'll pick a field that they are doing mid-year, and they don't have the equipment to do it with, or don't want to pay somebody to come do it. They still think, well, we got all this, but no, primarily everything around here now is all strip till.
Well, that's as our system's evolved here the last couple of years, that's been the biggest challenge. I'm trying to figure out is, it sounds like you have it figured out already, is you've got an actual schedule of field maintenance. For us, just getting time to fix a tile line with the weather pattern we're in right now is a nightmare. Now that's foreign to you. You're adding moisture, we're getting rid of moisture. But if we get a tile line blowout or something like that, you got to get it fixed now. But then you got the conundrum. Okay, we've got a rough spot there and stuff like that. How am I gonna heal that? I guess is the way I usually look. But then our field borders and stuff like that, trying to keep them maintained a little bit. That's what I'm trying to figure out in our rotation. Where could I bring something in that gives us that window to do stuff like that? And I think, we're getting back to working with feedlot and that. So that's starting to open up some windows, and changing just them subtle little things is going to help us long term. So, but
Yeah, I only have to go about 45 miles from here and farther west, and there's some farms out there that had tile lines. But they had it because they had salt area. It's basically kind of the lake bottom.
saline seeps and stuff like that.
Correct. So they would really try to flood the top and then draw the salts out through the tile. Of course, 35, 40 years ago, that created a huge environmental problem, but that was away from here, but it still affected us too, because if one farmer gets spanked, everybody's guilty.
Michaela,
let's give Michaela an opportunity.
We better get you involved here. I mean,
Yeah.
we'll be breaking for dinner here pretty soon. The way this is going, or
Oh, I
breakfast or
know.
Tom.
No, it's so interesting though. But I think, Loran, I'll come back to something that you just referenced, the weather patterns. I know, Tom, you talked about this. So Loran and Lincoln, could you kind of tell us what 2023 looked like for you and how that impacted your usual operations in terms of weather?
2023 here has been, I would say it's further proof, the average anymore is the battle of the extremes. And, I tend to fly by the seat of the pants a lot on a lot of what we're doing. And, early this year, we seen how dry we were going. So that's why we started terminating cover crops in that early. And even the relay crop, we had fewer relay acres this year just for the simple fact I knew we were down on moisture and stuff like that. So having the comfort level of pulling the plug early was a good decision for us. And then riding that out on the backside, was the one field of relay crop we did actually keep. It was bad enough that we pulled in with the forage chopper and took a sample just to see what the quality was going to be. We were going to direct cut the beans and the rye stubble together to make forage and get some kind of income off them fields, because we're uninsured on them acres and all that. So it's like, we got to pay bills. What can we do? And the forage sample came back, and he's like, "Well, I think $150 an acre is about what I can pay you for that." I guess I was bullheaded enough, thinking I was optimistic we could at least get $200 worth of beans off there. So I said, "Hey, $200, or I'm going to watch." I was watching the forecast the whole time, and I started seeing the rains, and within 2 to 3 weeks, we had 3, 4 more inches of rain. All of a sudden, bang, and them beans ended up running the mid-30s. So, got lucky and made the right decision. And, but we did that based on confidence of what we've seen in the past. And, the same can be said on our corn. We made fields going 250, 255 bushel an acre corn on less than 10 inches of moisture overall. Would I have the confidence to do that again? Definitely, based on some of what we've seen now, because we had nitrogen check strips and all that in there. And, I never fathomed that we'd get as low as 3.35 pounds of N per bushel, but we made it there this year. And everybody's like, "Well, how'd you?" I was like, "Because I was cheap." It was pure blind dumb luck that we had the confidence to do that, because it's so dry, you're not going to drop extra nitrogen in there because it's not going to get down to the roots. And that's why spend the money. And everybody I talked to since said, "Yeah, we spent the extra money and it didn't add to yield." So, that's the quick and dirty of the year in my world. How about yours?
Yeah, we were super wet. We came in dry. And then it started raining the last week of June. It didn't stop. We got about 20 inches over that 4-week period. Um, and, like I said, I'm up in the hills, so we don't flood, but I do have a high water table. I basically lost half production at the home farm. And that happened in 2021 too. And 2018 wasn't great either along the moisture lines. Last year was a drought for everybody down in the valley where most of the farms are. Or if you guys saw in the news, but Vermont and Massachusetts and Connecticut, there's horrible flooding all along, and a lot of this stuff is for food, so the safety restrictions are really intense. If you had floated water in there at all, that wasn't worth anything. Vegetable people in particular tend not to have insurance, so this was a major disaster for especially larger farms where they would have bigger crews, H2A crews. And then the question is, what's this crew going to do for the rest of the season? Some of the silage people, dairy people, some of the tobacco people have insurance, and so it was no cakewalk for them either. But I would say in particular, it seemed like the vegetable people got hammered, and then the state has to come in with emergency funds. And my question is how long taxpayers are going to have a tolerance for bailing everybody out. But this kind of variability, there's been a series of meetings in our area called No More Normal. We're all looking for solutions that feel resilient in drought and flood. And
initially, that's what led to the cold roof.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've gotten really into this clover living mulch system that Loran's played with a bunch too. But you basically have this perennial clover living mulch, and then you plant right into it. And I guess I feel like having a perennial to help even out some of the craziness from one year to the other, it just provides this baseline. And so moisture wise, it's going to help transpire moisture out when there's a lot of it. When it gets hot and dry, it's going to shade the soil surface, and so you lose less moisture. It just can kind of help. It's not a cure-all, but it feels like moving in this direction just gives you something to rely on from one season to the next. And especially where we are, we have these hurricane events now. One thing you can count on, hurricane season just seems more intense, every year. Those come up the coast and they'll dump a few inches of rain, usually right around the time when crops are getting harvested and rye is getting sown as a cover crop. But rye like that at an inch tall is not doing anything for erosion. It's not holding your soil in place at all. And so again, looking for what can we do to keep the soil covered at that time of year to have living roots and something over the soil surface. And so we started with where, talking about the clover living mulch is really way out there, but we just started with interseeding the clover so that we would have that solid stand of clover to protect the soil in August. And yeah, I'm really interested. I mean, interseeding used to be a normal thing. This is something Loran and I were talking about yesterday. I think we both found out about it reading stuff that was written in like the 1890s, early 1900s. It was a normal practice, I think, before. I think a lot of it had to do with
1870s to 1890. University of Tennessee had some of the best data out there.
And this was before synthetic fertilizer, right? So I think the incentive was there for people to get the clover into the corn. You're getting your nitrogen for the following season. And so it was worth that extra little bit of hassle to get out there and figure out how to do it. And then it seems like we lost the knowledge of, rates, timing, and now I'm always surprised. People think it's a little wacky to interseed like that. It's some new technique, but it's not at all. It's a very well established old technique, and I've just been super happy with it. I feel like it works incredibly well for us. The living mulch to us is taking it to the next step. That's pretty uncomfortable, But it's like, where can we go with this that would be, have even more of those benefits?
Well, the thing I heard Tom talk about earlier is on the alfalfa, you sprayed a product that forces the alfalfa into dormancy and kills weeds. Do you happen to know what product that is? Light bulb moment here.
Like I said, my son-in-law's kind of been handling that side of the equation for the last few years, and I honestly, I got to plead ignorance.
Sure. We'd be curious.
We might have to exchange that ideal after the fact, because
and whether is it setting it back, or is it actually putting it into dormancy?
No, it just that's to me that's the next frontier, trying to figure out how to as we get limited more on herbicides and that you're already there. The cropping system is going to have to evolve, and that's why we push the relay and the companion and all that. Well, if we could start figuring that something as subtle as just stunning the plant at the right time, we've done that.
Yeah, and so actually we're not. It doesn't put it into dormancy, but what it does, so we have the option of having dormant alfalfa out here. Yeah. We just don't use it anymore because of it just didn't seem to work timely wise. So we have a non-dormant variety. So basically what it does, it's a burn down on the alfalfa, but it's actually a residual on the other weeds that would be coming along. So, but what's interesting, you were talking about the interseeding. There's a couple of consultants out here now, because the catchphrase in California now is regenerative agriculture. So there's some consultants that are offering and trying to do trials on the interseeding, saying that it's old school, trying to bring it back. So I found it interesting. It doesn't appear that it's going to work here, in the sense that by the time you try to interseed the clover, when you go to take the feed off, you're going to have the equipment, the trucks, spinning out on clover, because now you've got this growth that's going to mat down. There's a benefit to it, but it's detrimental on the other side as well. So, but yeah,
if you're pulling the kind of corn silage yields you were mentioning, that's going to be a degree of difficulty right there. I mean, I can just imagine the canopy you guys have at 35 ton corn silage is phenomenal.
And we're sitting there at 12 foot, 13 foot tall. It's not like a grain variety you'd have in the Midwest, where you try to keep it at 6 or 7 foot max. So,
and you guys have a different set of. You're going from green to green to green to green. It's a different set of considerations to places with hard winter, where the key that I love it for is the kind of alternative would be rye or small grain, and trying to get decent growth on that post-harvest is very difficult. We only have just that one shot, that one, warm window when you get that stuff established. So the interseeding in our climate plays a pretty critical role there, to my mind, of, your rye is just going to fit into this tiny window before the ground freezes up. So can we extend that window through interseeding so that we can take advantage of the warmth and the day length during the main cash crop growing season to get the cover crop rolling? But you're obviously in a very, very different situation. You're just going to go back in and have something green following what you just harvested. As soon as you chop that forage, there's going to be something else to see down in there.
Yeah, we're trying to gap the fallow period where he doesn't. Right. I mean, he's got crop during the fallow. There is no fallow
period.
other than the short window from harvest to emergence. And if you go really deep, go mailing and all that's 27-day cycle, and I'm guessing your next crop is already up and going. You said 7 days and the corn's up and all that, and it's like, how many days we kill to have corn emerging 7 days around here?
Lauren's about to move.
Thinking
about it.
At that time of year when we're planting it, we're also dealing with 80, 85 degree weather.
Right.
Yeah, and we always used to joke the coulters on our planter were frost cutters. So
Yeah.
All right, Michaela.
My
we better
next
let you ask
question,
another
yeah.
question. Where
Well,
we go here?
it's building on what you three have just been talking about it with the extreme weather events that you're seeing. What role do you see technology playing in helping you manage that?
No, I guess, for me, that's right up the alley where we've been going. And, we can do everything without the auto steer and all that stuff, but it's just made things easier. And now where I'm at with the robots and all that, figuring out, how can the biggest thing I'm keen with the robots is we can do things that I can't do today. And the more we figure out how to do that stuff, the road spacing changes and all that stuff. How can I squeeze something in there in between? And that's what I'm like Tom. If we could start running the robots down in between that corn 2 to 3 weeks before you harvest that silage and get that next crop planted, is that something that would help in that area? I guess is you're already a tight window, but could we help tighten that window up even more in a conventional cropping system? The vegetables and that I know we can help in that area, but on a broad acre conventional mindset, can we start tightening them windows up and get that next crop planted? Yes, you're going to have the traffic and all that, but there's certain stages there when you can get in and out of there without hurting stuff.
Can you just explain to everyone what the robot is?
Oh, one of the projects we just, we can run down in between the rows and seed and maintain, mow and weed.
It's a little
Basically, 24 inches wide right now it is. And I don't know what else to explain on it. I mean, just it's management options that we're helping build now. And, part of what I'm doing right now is helping build the attachments to try to get more uses out of them. What I'm hopefully finishing up today is we're going to be doing soil sampling and soil probing with them, and a guy to even be able to do that in crop if everything works. So you'd be able to run that robot any time of the year, pull your soil samples, and by the time it leaves the field, you'd actually have the soil samples and that.
as far as interseeding, this thing would run between the rows and be able to establish a cover, at any stage of crop maturity, right? Because it's all
And big thing is versus flying covers on that, it give you that soil to seed contact to help. Like I said, I've done the interseeding long enough. I know, we got the V4 to V5 window. Some areas it's up to V8, but then you've got that period from V8 to maturity where it's not going to do any good to put seed out there. And like I said, I just, after listening to a few things Tom said, I'm trying to figure out.
right. Could it squeeze in? I mean, the other thing is you don't have exactly. I mean, it sounds like you've got sometimes when there's rain and you'd rather be out of the field. But again, I think in more northern climate, like these things are super light. Like they could just be in and out of the field whenever. Like they're not time bound to when field operations can occur in the same way.
Well,
They could just be running around the field.
Go back to the early conversation. You're like right now, you're trying to seed the wheat and all that. If we can help tighten them windows up so you don't have the kids home from school running the drills and all that. For me personally, I've been gone enough this fall and that we had the drones in and we seeded a lot of cover crops and that, it was kind of neat. We were done seeding cover crops way before we were done with harvest. We actually had to drill one field with the drill. The rest was all applied before harvest and stuff like that. So that, and our cover crop stands and that'll hopefully show that next spring. Hopefully we'll be hardy enough to beat the winter here a little better. And that's the key on our end is we got to have them covers hardy enough to survive the winter. And the last several years we've almost froze out cereal rye and stuff like that. We've been seeing the winter kill even on cereal rye, and for me, get winter wheat, we've even had to pull that out. But now this year, following alfalfa with winter wheat and that, I think we've got the window to start getting some of that in earlier. And that's the fun things I'm trying to help figure out now. How we can expand them windows and get things in sooner and earlier.
And Tom, what about you in terms of what technology do you see has the most potential for you in your area?
Well, really the auto steers and all those things have been around. I mean, we've been involved in that with yield mapping and all that for 30 years already. And the only the only thing I dislike about that is that it seems like every 3 or 4 or 5 years they want you to throw all your old stuff away and buy all new stuff. Um, I still have a couple of Trimble units that I had initially uh, that are still working.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they're just the light bar. I throw them here, throw them there. Just to kind of help guys get some things squared away. All the equipment now has auto steer. Uh, but what's really developing out here uh, is in the tree in the orchard situations. We have access now. They're in production. They're in use. Autonomous sprayers that'll run in the orchard. They'll take one guy run 4 units, and they're carrying 500 gallons of material, and they go they map the field and they turn them loose, and
Hmm.
they go out and they spray their mapped out section. They come back and uh, to the rig for refill. The nurse rig refills them, and then they go out and they do their second section. So
Wow.
uh, it's really labor saving. And labor is one thing, as we all know, is getting more difficult and dumber. The labor is just getting dumber all the time. Because they come out of the clear blue. They have no concept of they don't grow up on the farm anymore doing stuff. So it gets to be a little challenging. Um, Other than that, the outside of that, autonomous sprayers and those things like that. Um, we're getting better with our micro spray systems. Now there's some drones that are flying, doing some spraying. They're FAA certified. Um, it's just the technology. I think um, there's a lot that's waiting to break out. I think that we just have to get it approved and get it out there. There's always concerns. It's you got to have more experienced or more, I won't say intelligent, but more practiced people to operate this stuff. And um, some are getting excited about it, and some would like to find a way to sabotage it. So it's just really interesting in that function. We've had the technology on our it's like I said earlier, it got cold this morning, and our wind machines on our citrus started up. We didn't have to go out there.
Mm-hmm.
We've got full computer systems that's telling us what the oil pressure is, what the temperature is, what the voltage is, and we get warning signals when there's something doesn't seem to be right. Um, Moisture sensors that are always telling us, hey, your moisture levels here. We're tracking. Okay, we got to plan on putting an irrigation on tomorrow or the next
Mm-hmm.
day. Our filter systems are all automated. Because running through drip hose, it's all got to be filtered so you don't plug everything up. They're self-sensing. They says, okay, it's time to surge and clean, and one filter will do it while the other ones keep the things going. And the technology is great, and it just keeps coming. So dairy wise, there's all kinds of new technology that's improved on old technology. It's just, how do you do it, and how do you do it better? It's like Loran is able to get crops seeded before, making things work. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and actually, I'm having fun. Getting my grandkids involved, because I don't know how much longer I'm going to be doing this. So exciting to see them, you know, understand and figure out, says, you know, I can farm from my phone. It's
Yeah.
kind of where we're getting to.
Yeah. Your Vavoo would be amazed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
And no doubt you'll feel the same. I mean, your grandkids will feel the same too. Like whatever the changes are that we can't anticipate that would blow your mind, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, just for me this week, we just got done vetting all the companies for ag launch, and when you want to talk some of the exciting technologies, and Tom brought it up. Some of the irrigation management just is mind-boggling when it's coming out. These sensors that we have down in our field now, through some of the spatial analysis data that's coming out, they'll be able to do that all virtually. I know AI scares a lot of people, but the way I always look at some of this stuff, if you use it as a tool and you know what you're doing, you're all right. But if you let it start controlling you, it's just like social media. It can be a negative if you let it be. But if you focus on how can I use that to the best advantage, that's when it becomes a success story. And like I said, and a lot of people, when they heard that irrigation management software, they're like, well, but none of us irrigate. I'm like, yeah, but if you start looking and talking, understanding what that can do even for a dryland farmer. It goes back to, you've seen the sensors in our field and that, when they can show that our farming practices actually improve water infiltration and that enough to where we could do flood mitigation. Now, if I could take their technology and apply that virtually to the whole watershed and show that, hey, us farmers are doing good, it's going to bring it back to what Tom talked about earlier, the regulation. I mean, he's seeing it firsthand already, but if you're looking ahead, it's going to come here eventually. So being prepared is the best.
And the water sensing technology too, that that really showed its value this winter, because we've had, like in our citrus, when the rain started, I mean, we had so much rain, it also told you if you had too much water.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's other growers, in their almond and pistachio orchards, they still had the ability to flood, even though they hadn't in forever, because having gone through drought situations. I know this is mind-boggling, but in this calendar year, my irrigation district has brought in 6 acre-feet per acre of water that we had to utilize, save. So we were over irrigating when it was raining in January and February. So we could tell, hey, we've got to not put more water over there, or we can still get more water over there without doing damage. Because as well as we had the low side, we had the high side. So there was a lot of orchards that were being flooded and kept underwater for a month at a time and did no damage, because they were still able to be sure that it wasn't a total saturation.
Right.
Some soils were taking the water in, and some, not so much. So it was a tool that was used for exactly the opposite of what it was intended.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So there was open land that was flooded, just water put on to percolate in the underground. I've got a recharge basin that on January 4th, we started putting water in it, and it had water in it every day until the 11th of this month of November. Recharging underground aquifers. We've raised our underground aquifers up about 45 feet.
Wow. Wow.
How deep would that water be then, I guess?
So our groundwater, our soil level to groundwater right now is at about 140 feet. And we had been as low as, 225. Years ago, we were at 60. We've stabilized it in the last 6 years because of water management tools and a lot of things we've been able to do. But It's like I said, this year we brought in 6 acre-feet per acre on a 100,000-acre district. Last year we had 0. So the only thing we had to irrigate with last year, number one is only farmed 45% of our acreage. We had a lot of acreage we didn't have water for because we had to pump water. And we had no surface water available at all to bring in. So if it wasn't for the surface water, there'd be a whole lot less farming, a lot of less activity here.
Wow.
Phenomenal. That goes back to that trip in 08 when we went across the Highway 10, I think it was, one side of the road farm, the other side's desert. So,
yeah.
And you start understanding water rights and that, it just blows your mind. So, how are we doing, Michaela? Any questions or?
I have
quiet
questions, and I'll put in the call for questions from our audience too as we get to our last 15 minutes here. So, one thing I wanted to ask the three of you about is dealer and manufacturer support. How is that for you, and where can they improve?
At my small scale, this kind of ties into the last question too, and I'd say, almost more New England and the Northeast generally. I'm personally a huge fan of these technologies, and I think what they can do for us and how they can improve the way that we farm. And I think there's fear in my area and even me personally that, we're not at a scale where we can afford a lot of this stuff. And we're already at a higher price point for a lot of what we do just because we don't have those efficiencies of scale based on what land is available to us. And some of these technologies, I think we all have our fingers crossed that as they develop, they become affordable for smaller scale farms in the Northeast so that we don't just get sort of stuck in this place where, they're out there for larger agricultural operations, but now we're still doing things and our price relatively stays high and doesn't get to benefit from some of the labor savings in particular that these technologies have to offer. As far as that, the market for farms at our scale, equipment wise, is so concentrated in Europe. I'm pressing buttons on things. Sorry. Super concentrated in Europe. And so, a lot of the cool vegetable equipment is coming out of there, and getting support for that is one of the, can be a challenge. There's not that many dealers around in our area who have that stuff, but they are definitely a generation ahead of us in terms of sophisticated, small scale agricultural tech.
I would say for me, the biggest thing I see on the equipment side, and especially on the maintenance side, is I've always generally done a very good majority of the work myself. And now, with a few health issues and that, I've had to rely on the dealer a lot more than I ever have in the last 2 years. And the ability to repair your own equipment pays dividends drastically. And, I hate to think what my repair bill at the local dealers have been just in the last year and that, but, thankfully we've got some good, strong dealers here yet that can, if I need something fixed, they can get her done within a day. And, even through the COVID stuff and all that, they were able to maintain parts inventory, and I heard, I had front row seats to some of the horror stories on the manufacturing side, kudos to the dealers that were able to keep going through that and, focused on customer service and all that. And I understand they got to raise the rates and all that, but it is, when you start talking the percentage of what my repair bill, I'm waiting to see what the CPA says this year. Because he always complains my repair and maintenance is pretty high because, I want things to work when I'm ready to go, and we probably maintain things a little higher than most people's standards. But this year, rolling the combine and all that, getting a combine that needed a lot of work, apparently, that's been a challenge.
Yeah, our dealer network out here in California is really really strong for a lot of different manufacturers. You know, every tractor you could think of has a fairly strong dealership out here. My uh, my fortune comes in the fact that, you know, my local John Deere dealer is only 4 miles down the road, and they're pretty well stocked. They have, you know, 3 stores, and if I have to, if they don't have it in one, they'll have it in another, and it's within driving distance. And their distribution center is up in Stockton, which is 3.5 hour drive, and I've made that emergency run before. But you know, just the relationship with them, and the fact that they have a great relationship with Deere on the engineering, manufacturing, research side. We're fortunate to have a lot of the prototype stuff. You know, we had it back when we were running combines, and you know, things kind of changed into where you know, the combines went away, and we're in the forage harvesters now. And you know, when Harvest Lab was being developed, you know, it's the technology of knowing what your feed quality is, the moistures and everything else as you're doing it, you know, helps you put it in the pile right, which makes better quality for the feed on the intake in the cows, output on the other end, you know. Same thing with Caterpillar. We got a very, very strong Caterpillar network out here, and you know, we have access to some really good and some really fun stuff, you know, before anybody else. So, yeah,
some of that ties into the technology aspect too. You know, when you brought up the Harvest Lab and that, and, you know, the Dairy Foundation there we're involved with and that. You know, right now we're in the process of going from 2 robots to 4 robots on that, and you know, it's supposed to be a teaching institution, and you know, that was part of why they had the parlor and that yet to help teach students how to milk cows and that. Well, this past summer, it became pretty evident, you know, you got students that's supposed to be your labor pool and you couldn't even get them to milk the cows. You know, so that's making the decision to go to the more robots. And then on the flip side, now we've got the data to back up that the robots are actually, the robot cows are healthier, and you know, the production's better and all that. You know, that's where using them tools that are available is critical. And, you know, backing it up with working with a good dealer, because when you start relying on all that, you're going to need the dealer more than ever probably to maintain some of that.
And then how are rising interest rates affecting the three of you in your operation?
negatively, big time.
I would echo that. I mean, fortunately, we're not leveraged very much. So, you know, I'm on the other, you know, to the point where, you know, if I was going to keep pushing and expanding, yes, it would drastically. But we pulled back the reins there several years ago, and we're pretty low debt. So I'd like to say it's positively affecting my CDs and all that, but I still haven't been able to afford all that stuff. So now's a good time to be low debt, I guess. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I'd say out here in California, what it's done is it's stopped a lot of family expansion. What we see in sales is corporate farms, you know, buying up, and that's when I say corporate farms, it's not a family that has a corporation like you have in the Midwest. It's the investor groups, you know, that are trying to get in because of our water values. You know, they're buying ground, they're buying water, they're sinking water, getting water credits. So it's changed the landscape, and you know, there was still families buying some adjoining properties or things like that until the last couple of years when the interest rates took off, and you know, inflation has just pushed it. So, you know, there's a lot of families that are just throwing in the towels and being bought up by the corporate farming game.
Tom, can you explain that a little bit? What are they Where are they not, you're saying they're not farming?
Yeah, they're so they're farming, but they're also farming. They're farming water resources as well, because when say if you're in the Midwest and you depend on rain and you don't irrigate, well, that's what it is. Well, out here there's networks and abilities to water transfer, move water, um, you know, work out negotiations. And, like last year during the drought year, there was water being sold and transferred for $1,500 an acre foot. That you cannot afford to farm on that if you're, if you're just farming. You have to be working other deals too. And, that's a little bit of what's taking place.
Wow.
Just for reference, what is land values in both of your areas? I mean, a farm kitty corner here just a week ago sold $15,000 an acre. So, what would that be in your? I mean, ready to farm land. What would that be with no development rights in your area?
There was some open land that sold here the other day, 4 or 5 months ago, uh, in a water district, without a lot of water for 35,000. Um, if you go a little bit farther away and there's some land that's not in a water district, that has no ability to have water delivered to it, it's probably worth 8 to 9 thousand now.
Wow.
Uh,
Why so much? That's without development rights.
because there is still what they call a safe yield of water that they can transfer to some adjoining properties. And at the end of the day, the value of water calculates into everything.
Yeah. Yeah, where we are, it's all about, development. And even when there's an agricultural restriction on a piece of land, there's really no enforcement to have that actually be farmed. So you can have somebody come up from the city and buy a farm that's under agricultural restriction and not do anything there. I think maybe they have to show $5,000 of income a year or something. So a lot of these places turn into like estates. That and the inherent value of the land, except for the small kind of strips along the river valleys, the inherent value, production wise, is really low. Where we are, we were looking pretty seriously at a 250-acre property a couple years ago that was about 100 tillable. The whole thing um, was considered way overvalued at $1 million for the 250 acres. And that's really because, that's kind of the state of agriculture on the one hand, and then they were basically holding on, expecting a buyer to come in and turn it into an estate. So I imagine, I don't know. I imagine there's some of that going on in California too, with some competition, but maybe California has better laws kind of enforcing that actual agriculture has to happen on farmland.
We've actually got a lot of land trusts now that are starting to come in and buy up some of the marginal lands,
Uh-huh.
and creating natural habitat per se, um, because of lack of available water. Um, the challenge I'm concerned about there is once they get established, their goal is to have natural habitat, and I don't care how you go about it, natural habitat still requires water. And so as we were going through the drought years, there was challenges because there was river water, going out to the ocean for the salmon that they've been trying to save, the Delta smelt for 50 years and have been unsuccessful. But on a normal year, the salmon seem to pop up better when they're less disturbed. So, sometimes you just need to leave it alone. Um, and I did see there is a question regarding California Proposition 12, if there's any changes having to do with the hogs. No, and I wish it would just go away. That had to do with any kind of hog product coming in from out of state had to meet the California requirements for the size of gestation crates and whatnot. We just got idiots over here, and I apologize for them right from the get-go.
Well,
Right.
Michaela, what do you think? We've better respect for folks' time.
Yes, yeah. So I'll put it out there to the three of you quickly what your outlook is for 2024, and then we'll wrap this up.
I'll make it easy. I'm looking forward to 24. Just we got another grandkid on the way, and family and time of enjoyment, I guess, is what I'm looking forward to.
Congrats.
Probably not what you expect, but
no.
We've been doing these. I've got a new organization that's doing these clover living mulch trials with a bunch of farms, mostly in the Northeast, but also out this way. And our winter meeting's coming up, our first one. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to it. It's a great group of farmers. I'm really looking forward to having a community of people, of friends to do some of this problem solving with, where we're really working on the same set of issues, very different farms represented in this group, but all having the same conversation and really trying to move this one particular technique, closer to where it's established enough that we can start talking about really adopting it in, not a crazy risky way. But yeah, it's given me the opportunity to just make so many connections. I wouldn't be out here if I wasn't doing it. This has been fun. I'm glad to be on this podcast very randomly. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, I'm looking forward to a lot more of this kind of stuff in 24.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to 24 as well, as long as the inflation rate, the interest rates stabilize. Hopefully they come down. Because we did some things a few years ago that were necessary at the time, but it just puts a little extra pressure. But we were blessed with water this year. It looks like we're going to have another another wet winter. We're prepared for it. We can handle it. And the crop prices are fair. They're not where they were 2 years ago. They've come down somewhat in the pistachios and the almonds. For growers that are heavily vested in that. Walnuts have taken a complete drop in the toilet. These poor guys are suffering. Some didn't even harvest their nuts this year. What little they had, they left on the ground because they weren't worth picking up, which is a sad state of affairs. But in the overall scheme of things, if in California you've always should have been diversified to some degree, and if you weren't, basically that was your fault. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and in particular, the more every year goes by, the more my grandkids get involved, and we're just having a ball. So yeah, I think it's going to be good.
All right. Well, thank you, Tom, Lincoln, and Loran for joining us this morning, and everyone else who watched through too. Thank you so much. Also want to thank A&I Products for sponsoring the 2023 Conservation Ag Operator Fellowship. And also want to mention that Lincoln mentioned the great networking and collaboration that he's got going on with his groups. And that's something that we really try and encourage with the National No-Tillage Conference, which is coming up January 9th through 12th. And Loran will be there speaking. And we have Rick Clark there too, and a bunch of other great speakers. So if you're looking for that community, you'll definitely find it there. So
he's attending, I think I said.
That's right. I'll be there.
Great. Perfect. So you can meet these two guys in person and go to no-tillconference.com for more information. And we have a really good $115 off of registration right now, and that's ending this weekend. So make sure you register now and get that. So once again, thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Tom, it's been a pleasure. Hope we get out there to California to see you. I'm looking very intrigued. So thank you.
Look me up anytime. The doors are open for all you guys. Much appreciated, and I really enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
And if you make Iowa, you might throw it on a podcast and throw you in the bed upstairs, sleep for the night, and throw you in a podcast the next morning. So,
yeah. All right, sounds good.
All right,
Thanks,
thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, and goodbye.